He called me sweetheart in front of the entire executive board. That was his first misstep. Not the most significant, but it was the moment I realized I'd tolerated his condescension for too long. He clearly believed I was harmless, a mere assistant, not the woman who had single-handedly resolved the data compression issue that had crippled his entire project last quarter. Yet, I offered a sweet smile, exactly what he expected, because I needed him to remain convinced I was still playing his game. So, when he advanced to slide 32 of my meticulously crafted white paper, now shamelessly retitled Dalton's Dynamic Reduction Model, I didn't erupt. I didn't expose him. I didn't even flinch when he announced, "We're in preliminary discussions with the Department of Defense." Instead, I sat quietly in the back row, counting the seconds, not out of fear, but because I was meticulously timing my move. There's a profound satisfaction in precision, in watching a trap, built from the inside, detonate at the exact moment you intended. At precisely 11:07 a.m., a single notification illuminated Dalton's phone, mid-presentation. He glanced down, his words fumbling. A minute later, an intern, bless her chaotic spirit, leaned over and whispered something that caused his ears to flush crimson. By 11:09 a.m., a man in a charcoal suit quietly entered the back of the auditorium, a representative from Patent Enforcement, East Coast Division. And at 11:10 a.m., just as Dalton was boasting about pioneering novel intellectual property, the screen behind him flickered twice, then transformed. It wasn't a malfunction. It was my name, filed, approved, stamped, and publicly displayed right there on the screen. A full-page image of the official U.S. Patent and Trademark Certificate. Patent number 11-994-72. Adaptive Layered Neural Framework for Multi-Stage Compression. Inventor, Dr. Nora Brandt. His jaw dropped, but no sound escaped. He looked like a thief who had broken into a house, only to find the owner calmly sipping coffee, holding a shotgun. And I wasn't finished. By 11:11 a.m., a suffocating silence had descended upon the room, the kind that grips your chest. Dalton stammered, attempting to articulate something about miscommunication and collaborative environments, but the screen behind him remained unyielding. That certificate stared back at him like a tombstone, etched with the demise of his career. He tapped his clicker. Nothing changed. He glanced backstage. No tech crew moved, because I had ensured they wouldn't. 2 nights prior, while he was preoccupied with presenting my draft white paper to legal for refinement, I was securing my time with the AV team. Nothing ostentatious, just subtle modifications. A preloaded PDF, a hard-coded trigger linked to his presentation laptop's internal clock. All it took was one extra USB drive, one board contractor who despised Dalton even more than I did, and one tiny file labeled Final Presentation Backup v3. Real final. He had opened it, of course. The man had an affinity for versions of things he didn't comprehend. At 11:12 a.m., the cease and desist order landed, live on the venue's Wi-Fi, no less. The board's inboxes ignited like a Christmas tree on overdrive. My attorney didn't await replies. He carbon copied the press. But I wasn't observing the unfolding chaos. I was already in motion. He didn't even notice me rise. He was still squinting at the certificate, as if intense scrutiny might alter the name boldly printed beneath the invention. I stepped into the aisle. A few people noticed. One whispered, another gasped. I walked down the center as if it were a runway, each step landing with the finality of a gavel. All the fury I had suppressed under countless late nights, polite smiles, and quarterly reviews now enveloped me like armor. He finally saw me when I was 10 feet away. "Nora," he began. I silenced him with a single raised hand. "Don't," I said, my voice calm. I wanted every syllable to resonate like a nail in his coffin. "You've already given the world your presentation. Now, allow me to give mine. I turned to the audience. You were just shown a white paper. What Dalton neglected to mention is that the model he presented, while impressive, was neither authored by him nor developed under his direction. I held up my phone and tapped the screen. The projector shifted again. This time, the audience saw the evidence. Commit logs, code differences, Slack messages, date-stamped documents, side-by-side revisions that clearly showed my name systematically removed, like rusted bolts. And finally, an email from Dalton, dated 3 weeks prior. Subject line: Quick favor, need to scrub Nora's name before we circulate this upstairs. The silence shattered. Someone in the back muttered, "Holy cow." And Dalton looked as if he had aged 10 years in 2 minutes. But that was merely the prelude, because what he didn't know, what no one in that room knew yet, was that I hadn't come to expose him. I had come to replace him. The boardroom they ushered us into reeked of money and nervous perspiration. A mahogany table, water bottles aligned like soldiers. Half the suits in that room had been blindly cheering for Dalton an hour ago. Now, they wouldn't meet his gaze. He was pacing, shoulders hunched, tie loosened like a noose attempting to escape. I sat upright, hands folded, silent, because I knew what they were about to discover. When you unleash the quiet one, she doesn't bark. She bites. Let's all just breathe, Meredith Cho, the chief legal officer said, her voice possessing the brittle calm of someone attempting to uncrack an egg. We're in uncharted waters, but if this can be resolved internally, it can't, I stated. Dalton spun toward me. Nora, come on, this is an overreaction. We were collaborators. You were part of my team. I wasn't part of anything. I snapped, louder than I intended. The air froze. You carved my name out of my own work like it was a typo. You handed it to Defense Tech Global, wrapped in your cologne and lies. His mouth opened, then closed. A flicker of panic seeped through the cracks. You told them it was your design, didn't you? I asked, staring directly at him. You sold the contract already? No one answered. They didn't have to. Dalton hadn't merely presented my model. He had sold it, inked a licensing agreement, 6 figures up front, more upon delivery. And the moment my patent became public, that agreement became radioactive. I'll forfeit the royalties, he said too quickly. Split IP. Heck, we can list you as co-inventor. Just delete the claim, Nora. Be reasonable. You think this is about money? I laughed, short and sharp. Dalton, if I wanted cash, I wouldn't have filed under my own name. I'd have auctioned the whole thing to your competitors with a bow on it. A few of the board members shifted. One scribbled something. I locked eyes with Meredith. He lied to your faces. He signed legal documents under false authorship. That's fraud. If you try to bury this, you're all complicit. Dalton's voice cracked. You're blowing up everything, Nora. Do you have any idea what you're doing? I stood slowly. I do, I said. I'm applying for your job. He laughed, too loudly. You're joking. Meredith didn't laugh, nor did the CTO. They simply stared because I wasn't bluffing. I had already filed a formal complaint with HR. I had submitted my full architecture revisions with detailed annotations. I had attached a confidential memo outlining every instance Dalton had overridden, delayed, or sabotaged progress in favor of his own vision. I reached into my bag and slid a folder across the table. Proposal, I said. Give me 6 months. I'll rebuild this department from the ground up. I'll secure contracts without lawsuits, and I'll do it without treating your engineers like ghosts. No one spoke. Then Meredith whispered, Good heavens. Dalton looked as if he might vomit. But the real twist, I hadn't even opened the second envelope yet, the one marked insurance, to be opened only if cornered. I had no intention of retreating, but I wanted him to try. I received the text at 3:17 a.m. Blocked number, no signature, just 6 words. You shouldn't have pushed this far. I didn't reply. I didn't need to, because if Dalton believed he could scare me back into the shadows, he had forgotten who built the shadows in the first place. He didn't know what I had been doing while he was out giving his TED Talks and sipping $20 cocktails with defense contractors. He didn't know about the backup drive in a safety deposit box across town, or the 3 sealed envelopes sitting in 3 different hands, each with a timed release of documents and access logs ready to go public if anything happened to me. The part that truly terrified him, I had nothing left to lose. He had already tried to erase me. What's one more thread in the dark? By sunrise, I was sitting in a booth at Orson's Diner, across from someone who hadn't worn a suit since the market crash of 2008, but still made venture capitalists flinch when his name surfaced in a conversation. Dalton's spiraling, I told him, pushing a flash drive across the sticky table. This is what he doesn't want the board to see. He's been manipulating his productivity metrics, fudging benchmark reports, ghostwriting testimonials from defense analysts who don't exist. The man took a sip of coffee and smirked. You're not just playing defense, you're firebombing the field. I don't want to burn it all down, I said. I want him off the map. You'll need allies, he said, and something explosive. I slid him the second folder, the one Dalton never imagined I'd touch. It was a non-disclosure agreement signed by Dalton, a buried document from 3 years ago, attached to a research trial that never progressed past ethics review because it was unethical. It involved synthetic recall induction in trauma patients, and it had resulted in a fatality. That project had vanished, or so Dalton thought. He had scrubbed the name, repackaged it, altered a few parameters, and sold it as a therapeutic diagnostic. He had slapped a bow on a corpse and called it innovation, and I had the proof. I need this in the right hands, I said. Not just to expose him. I want it to destroy any chance of a comeback. No TV spin, no podcast redemption arc, nothing. He nodded slowly. You're not just replacing him, he said. You're erasing him. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. No, I said. I'm just making sure the credits roll before he rewrites the ending. And outside, somewhere in the city, Dalton still believed this was merely about a white paper. He still hadn't realized that what I had patented wasn't just technology, it was leverage, and I was done being subtle. The press received the story before lunch. Not the patent, not yet. That would have been too clean. What hit first was a leak. A whistleblower tip alleging falsified reports on a now-canceled neural testing project that violated multiple federal standards. The name Dalton Cross appeared twice. Once in the internal memo, once in a subject line marked Urgent, Stop Deployment. And just like that, the story wasn't about intellectual property anymore. It was about ethics, about liability, about whether this company had blood in its circuitry. Dalton's silence was the loudest sound online. He didn't issue a statement, didn't hold a press conference. He simply vanished. Public relations scrambled, attempting to stall the narrative, but Reddit had already unearthed the archived forum posts, testimonials from fake profiles, the recycled diagrams used in 3 separate grant proposals. And every time they traced something back, buried in footnotes or completely redacted, his pattern had fingerprints. Mine had timestamps. But the real chaos began the moment his mother called me. Yes, she left a voicemail. Hi, Nora. I don't know what's going on, but Dalton hasn't slept in 2 days and keeps asking about a folder. He thinks you're bluffing. I told him not to reach out, but please, whatever this is, don't ruin him. He's still my son. I replayed it 3 times, not because I needed to hear her plead, but because that one sentence told me everything. He thinks you're bluffing. Good. Let him. Because while the company held emergency board meetings and Dalton desperately tried to scrub every digital fingerprint, I was already 3 moves ahead. That night, I attended a closed-door dinner hosted by a government tech procurement officer. Name withheld, NDA signed at the door, wine too expensive to truly savor. They didn't ask questions. They simply nodded as I placed the revised model on the table, stripped of corporate branding, clean, tested, and now fully patented under my name. Dalton was a mouthpiece. I stated plainly. I was the engineer. You want performance? You work with me directly. No middleman, no risk. No one flinched. Someone passed me a card. 3 letters, 1 contract. That's when I realized this wasn't just revenge. This was a transfer of power. I walked out of that restaurant and watched my breath fog in the cold, crisp air. Somewhere out there, Dalton was likely pacing his penthouse, calling in favors, shredding documents that were already backed up across 3 clouds. I could almost hear him screaming into a phone, demanding to know who had betrayed him. He hadn't figured it out yet. It wasn't someone. It was everyone. The first time I saw Dalton after everything erupted, he looked like someone wearing his own skin incorrectly. Unshaven, no tie, eyes bloodshot as if the truth had been waterboarding him for days. It was in the elevator, of all places, because of course it was. The same steel box where he used to smirk at me as if I were merely a flesh extension of his ambition. Now, he wouldn't meet my eyes. He cleared his throat. Nora, we need to talk. I didn't answer. I just stared at the floor as the numbers ascended. You went nuclear, he said, attempting a laugh, as if we were colleagues in some slapstick office tragedy. You ambushed me. You could have come to me first. Like you came to me when you scrubbed my name off the white paper? I asked. His jaw flexed. It was politics. Optics. You were disposable, I said, stepping closer. You're right. That's what you thought. But here's the thing, Dalton. You don't get to cry sabotage when the grenade goes off after you pulled the pin. He leaned in, voice low and sour. They're going to tear you down. You know that. These people love a phoenix story, but they love burning one even more. You're not built for this kind of attention. I smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made people reconsider reality. I'm not here to survive the fire, I whispered. I am the fire. The elevator chimed. I stepped out. He didn't follow. By the end of that week, the board suspended him pending investigation, which was code for, we don't want to be near you when the subpoenas land. They stripped his access, canceled his badge. HR quietly leaked his exit, burying it between news of a quarterly earnings dip and a new diversity initiative. But Dalton wasn't finished. No, he always fancied himself the phoenix. Thought if he crawled into enough podcasts and sobbed just right about intellectual misunderstandings and a brilliant woman he failed to uplift, he could emerge as a fallen hero. So he went to the press. Not just the tech blogs, but national outlets, glossy cover stories, teary-eyed rebrand videos, a documentary pitch. One headline literally said, "The man who gave her wings." I nearly choked on my coffee. He wasn't just rewriting history, he was selling it. Here's where things got interesting, because while he was on his redemption tour, spinning half-truths and desperate nostalgia, I was already collaborating with compliance. You see, the ethics board never truly closed the file on the synthetic recall program. They just never had enough evidence to reopen it. Until now. Until I sent them a file labeled Patient X, Session 14, Raw Audio. I never intended for the public to hear it, but the leak came anyway. Dalton's voice, coaching a subject to relive trauma, promising calibrated healing, ignoring flagged brain activity. The recording cut off mid-scream. It spread like wildfire. His podcast deals evaporated. His redemption arc snapped in half like wet wood. Suddenly, no one cared about the white paper anymore. They were asking bigger questions now, criminal ones. They found him 3 days later in a rental car, parked outside a shuttered co-working space in Jersey City. Not dead, thankfully, just half-conscious, dehydrated, and clutching a laptop as if it could still offer him solace. The headlines were merciless. From visionary to liability, neural pioneer implodes under ethics scandal. Dalton Cross, a case study in tech arrogance. I didn't gloat, not publicly. No petty tweets, no subtle jabs, no champagne-soaked Instagram captions, because this wasn't about fireworks. It was about fallout, and mine was still spreading. The company offered me a buyout first. 7 figures, a clean exit, a gold-plated apology, the whole let's move on dance. I declined. Then came the counteroffer, not from the company, but from the Pentagon. You see, while Dalton was selling vapor and lies, I was refining the compression model, transforming what used to be academic into applied warfare. They wanted in, exclusive rights, joint lab, dual-use clearance. I had one condition: full autonomy. My team, my terms. A clause stating Dalton Cross was permanently blacklisted from every tier of the project. They agreed in under 20 minutes. But before I signed, I had one last thing to do: the PTA meeting. You heard me right. Dalton's younger sister, sweet, naive Melanie, had married into a very old-money suburb in Connecticut. She ran the local school board, still believed Dalton was misunderstood, thought I was bitter and milking the media. She posted about it often. I showed up uninvited. I waited until she began her little speech on STEM mentorship for girls. Then I raised my hand, introduced myself, and asked one question. Would you still consider your brother a role model if you knew he signed off on unlicensed trauma manipulation trials that caused 2 neural deaths and 1 permanent vegetative state? The room went silent. Melanie froze, blinked, tried to laugh. I don't think that's appropriate. I pulled a printed transcript from my folder, dropped it on the table. Page 4, line 38. That's his voice instructing the subject to override pain response thresholds. You're welcome to play the audio for the room. Gasps. One woman crossed herself. Melanie just crumbled. No words, just wet eyes and silence. I left before anyone else could speak, because sometimes closure isn't a conversation. It's a spotlight. And sometimes revenge isn't fire. It's factual, old, undeniable, eternal. The contract was signed in a silent, windowless room with biometric locks and 0 small talk. Just 4 people, 2 pens, 1 document that would reshape everything. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. The signature was enough. Mine, not Dalton's. Mine, in blue ink, right next to the words, Lead Architect, Neural Defense Systems Division. That title used to be his wet dream. Now it was just an echo in my inbox. I walked out into a foggy November morning, the kind that makes everything feel like a scene from a movie you don't quite remember watching. The city moved around me, unaware, uncaring, and I liked it that way. No more handshakes, no more networking brunches, no more men calling me kiddo while stealing credit with the grace of a raccoon in a trash can. Just silence and forward motion. Dalton, last I heard, was living off the grid. Some startup in Iceland funded by crypto bros who hadn't yet Googled his name. He sends out monthly newsletters now, neurophilosophy essays full of AI buzzwords and redemptive nonsense. Nobody reads them. He tried contacting me once, email subject line. Can we talk? I didn't open it. Instead, I printed it, framed it, hung it in my new office, right below the patent, right beside the award from the defense secretary. And under that, a sticky note, my own handwriting, just 2 words, not yours. Because that's what this was about, always. Not revenge, not even justice, just reclamation of voice, of value, of name. He built a kingdom of mirrors and called it legacy. I shattered it, then built something real out of the pieces. And now, when they talk about innovation in the neural space, they don't mention him. They say my name, clearly, loudly, and with respect. Lesson learned. This story teaches us that true recognition comes from integrity and hard work, not from deceit or stealing others' achievements. While it may feel satisfying to seek revenge, the most powerful and positive outcome is often to reclaim your own worth. Build something genuine and let your accomplishments speak for themselves. Focus on your own growth and success, and the truth will ultimately prevail, leading to lasting respect and fulfillment.